Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the USA, English language, released in the year 2022, directed by David Blue Garcia, and this film is called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is about a very secluded ghost town in Texas. You've got a group of friends whose dream is to make this ghost town into a utopia where people from the busy city life can escape their problems and live in peace and harmony. So the group of friends, they're very popular on social media and they've got the backing of investors who are travelling in a bus to the same destination. And so these group of friends want to get there before and they want to scope out this environment and try and visualise that dream. So that dream is becoming closer and closer, but what everyone doesn't realise is that this ghost town is tied to a very dark secret in the 1970s that involved a group of friends that were terrorised by a chainsaw-wielding maniac. Now, what these group of friends don't realise is that the past is about to clash with the present, and this dangerous presence is going to reveal itself, which in turn creates a bloody nightmare for survival for everyone involved. So whether or not they live to tell the tale, something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Unfortunately, this movie was nowhere near as good as I wanted it to be. Now, there are some positives to this film, but unfortunately the negatives far outweigh it. Now, the biggest positive to Texas Chainsaw Massacre is Leatherface and the gore. The gore was absolutely phenomenal. This is an incredibly brutal film, and you get a lot of chainsaw on human flesh. So if you go in there expecting that this movie is going to deliver that in spades, I definitely thought as though the practical gore effects were absolutely phenomenal. There are some really inventive kills, and so if you go in there expecting a slasher type of movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is definitely for you. Fede Alvarez is connected to this movie. He's not the actual director, but he is connected to it, so it's no surprise that the gore effects and the overall bloodshed, it's an incredibly brutal film because he was responsible for the reboot of Evil Dead. So as the gore effects and just some of the set pieces I thought were really well thought out, and the overall Texas Chainsaw Massacre feel I thought was there, by basically being in the middle of nowhere, very hot and dry conditions, very unforgiving landscaping. So if you go in expecting a very, very violent film that is doused in Texas Chainsaw Massacre atmosphere, then this is a film that is not going to disappoint. But unfortunately, the reason why I think this is incredibly disappointing is that it's no different from the other reboots. This is a film that's recycling stuff you've seen before, but it just ups the ante as far as brutality is concerned. So the storyline, it was uninteresting. I didn't care about any of the characters. I was basically just waiting for Leatherface to kill someone, and I was wondering how more brutal the next kill would be than the last. So that was unfortunately the reason why it outstayed its welcome well before the end. And unfortunately, a lot of these remakes forget what made Texas Chainsaw Massacre the original so good. And what made the original so good is that you leave that film tricking yourself as to thinking that it was a lot more brutal than it was. That movie didn't show any blood, but you come away from that experience traumatized. You feel as though you've seen something shocking because of the intensity of the atmosphere, the intensity of this psychological torture that these characters were going through. That was definitely an endurance test without using any cheap tricks. And so that's why I feel as though Texas Chainsaw Massacre original is probably the best horror film ever made, is because it had a low budget, but it used its intensity as far as atmosphere is concerned to trick the audience into thinking they've witnessed something a lot more brutal than you would get as far as this film in particular is concerned. This is a very brutal film, but the original, you feel as though it was just as brutal, but you have to remind yourself you didn't actually see any blood. And so that's something that is psychologically damaging, and it takes a very good filmmaker to be able to achieve that. But unfortunately, the rest of these remakes, reboots, they're splashing the gore and violence, and they're using very cheap tricks, and so they're just cashing in off the name. And that's the best way I can sum Texas Chainsaw Massacre up, is that it is using Leatherface, and I thought Leatherface looked very good in this film. And there are some moments with Leatherface that I thought were good. There are also moments with Leatherface that I thought were really bad. They're trying to humanise Leatherface to a degree, which I thought completely destroyed the purpose of what this guy was all about. He was a psychotic killing machine. And that makes him even more terrifying, not knowing who he is and not trying to humanise him. This is someone that is your worst nightmare. You don't want to come across him. But when you try to humanise him, you start to try to get that relatability. But it's definitely someone you cannot relate to. So why even bother trying? And so it tries to shift sort of the supporting mechanism as to, you know, feeling sorry for Leatherface, but that's something that I thought didn't work at all, because the stuff that he was doing was so far out of the realms of what I would do that I just didn't want to connect to him. I just wanted to see him slaughter these fuzzy faces in the background. And so the movie just doesn't really try to be different from the other films. It doesn't try to humanize the people getting brutally murdered. The draw card is Leatherface and how Leatherface is going to kill people with the chainsaw. So that was definitely the biggest disappointment with this movie. You know, considering Fede Alvarez made Evil Dead, that I thought actually produced something different to that original, I still thought as though this movie, although it stays true to the overall tone of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it didn't provide anything new, and I thought as though it was a very lazy film. Although it was very well made, the overall story and the motivation behind this, I thought, was all related to making money. It wasn't related to loving the franchise. It wasn't it wasn't related to trying to evolve the franchise into something different, which is what I thought Alexander Bastillo and Julian Maury did with Leatherface. A lot of people didn't like Leatherface, but I really liked that. I thought as though it was very nasty and it was very different without staying out of the realm of what Texas Chainsaw Massacre is. It stayed true to the lore, but I thought as though I was watching something different. And so I really liked Leatherface. That was my favourite film after the original, which I know a lot of people are going to disagree with, but that's what I thought the franchise needed. Another film that kind of tried to break away from the stereotype and the generic quality of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, trying to make something a little bit different with staying true to what made the franchise what it is. But unfortunately, it's just a recycled movie of blood and violence, and when you steer clear of the blood and violence, basically you've got nothing else that saves the film. It is well made, but I thought as though the overall story, it wasn't made for the right reasons, and that unfortunately is the reason why I come away from this movie very disappointed. It's very generic, and ultimately one that I would say, if you're a die-hard fan of the franchise, check it out. If you're a die-hard fan of Gore, check it out. But if you want something different and you haven't seen before, then unfortunately Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not for you. And as a result of that, I'm only going to give this film 1.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.